Welcome, people of the World Wide Web. So it's Cypher Sigma here. It is a Saturday, and yes, it is another movie review. So yes, the movie we have is obviously Tom Cruise's final Mission Impossible movie. As far as we are aware, Final Reckoning, what is essentially the 8th movie in a 29-year story of Ethan Hunt, the MI, or the leader of the MI force, the IMF, the Impossible Mission Force. So this is the longest running movie at 2 hours and 49 minutes. There is nothing after the credits or anything else like that. So once you get to the end, that's it. There's a massive cast I'll go into it. So you have Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise returning as Ethan Hunt, Hayley Atwell as Grace, Ving Rhames as Luther, Simon Pegg as Benji, Pom Fleer, if you pronounce her, as Paris. Then we have Henry Chesney with as Kid Rich, obviously one of the longest returning members, and then you have Shay Wington as Briggs, and obviously his partner Greg Tarzan Davis as Degas. From the previous installation, we have Isael Morales as Gabriel, the person who was working for the entity, and then we have new additions: Nick Offerman as General Sidney, Angela Bassett as the now president, as she was absent from the last movie, Hannah Waddington as Admiral Neely, and returning from the first movie, the longest running, is Rolf Saxton as William Donlow. He was a bloke in the safe, what the knife gets dropped on his desk. So if anybody who hasn't seen this or hasn't known, essentially at the end of the last movie, you found out there was this computer kind of virus, this entity that is basically starting to turn the world against it. It needed a key, and that was the whole ploy of the last movie. In the end, Ethan managed to save the key from it, and the key basically opens up a kind of safe which has a component which could affect the entity, and is the only one of there, but he doesn't know where it is, and he has gone off into the wild. And essentially this is a movie of him figuring out what to do, and as the entity is trying to take over the world by taking over their military and nuclear power, Tom Cruise is Ethan Hunt is tasked with trying to stop him, but certain people want to control it, he wants to destroy it, and where do we all go from this? So I did enjoy the movie, I will give it that much. So I'll put the spoiler warning up and we shall get into it. So I say, as the movie starts, we have Ethan Hunt sitting in a chair listening to a cassette and a VHS tape, if you're old enough to know what they are, listening to it. Basically, the president saying that, you need to come in. You've always done you've always completed the task, but you've never necessarily completed it in the way you were asked to, but we want you to come back in. We need this key to get this device so we can control the entity and stuff like this. That's what the American government want to do. As Tom Cruise then meets up with several of his past teammates, he then goes to Luther. Luther is in this kind of abandoned subway tunnel. You can see medical equipment there, so he's obviously not well. He's in a gown. He's working on this device. Then when he goes back to kind of the rest of the team, this is where Gabriel comes in. Gabriel basically tricks Hunt, puts this massive bomb in with Luther. Luther has no choice but to disarm it, and obviously he's lost the little device that needs to go to the thing in the safe. Gabriel then has it. It blows up. Luther dies. Quite sad to start off with the movie this way. But he is quite upbeat, Luther, as always. He is, and he says there's a message for you and all this stuff, which is quite nice. And we'll get to that later in the film. Obviously, then they start chasing Gabriel. Unfortunately, Gabriel manages to get away, but in the process of this, they come across the device that Gabriel was using to speak to the entity. Ethan Hunt goes into it, speaks to it, and the entity basically says, "I need you to do this for me." And this is the only way to do about it. Obviously, Ethan's kind of given all this information, and he kind of comes up with a plan. He is going to go and get the device from the safe within the submarine, which you need from the last movie, and his team will go off and get the information, because there is a way to find it, and he gives them kind of the information, and then everybody kind of goes off on their own little adventure. The team end up going to this island where they end up meeting with Rolf Saxton, unfortunately then kidnapped by a load of Russian operatives. That's kind of what happens with them. There isn't too much that sort of thing. Tom Cruise's guy, on the other hand, he then hands himself in with the key to the American president. He says that, this is what's happening. You get to see that the entity is taking over the world and converting people and stuff like this. Like, there's video footage of people saying, I believe the entity is real. And then we basically see that the main powers in the world are starting to lose their their nuclear control of their nuclear devices, and that basically they've got like 3 odd days. And this then sets the time limit in the story. Angela Bassett, as the American president, gives him an aircraft carrier and sends him off to go and do his side of things. He knows obviously he's going to need to get to a specific point. So when he goes to this aircraft carrier, he meets Hannah Waddington's character. There's a little to and fro. She then says, like, there's this area where you need to get to the submarine. This is where I can take you. It might not happen. He goes out to it. They start getting threatened by the Russians because this is in Russian water. He then dives into the water and then he's kind of rescued by the team from the submarine. And this is when he explains that his mission is here. He needs to find this submarine. His team will look and find the coordinates and they will communicate it. But obviously this secret sub, it needs to keep going up. And obviously this one, the risk of being spotted by the Russians, and its job there is to determine the Russians. But the captain is quite gung-ho and says, like, I understand what you're doing. It's crazy, but obviously we're trying to find this big Russian ship anyway, so maybe this might help. They go through the process of this as they manage to get the coordinates, as the guys manage, as the Ethan Hunt's team. Obviously, in between this, Ethan at the very beginning with Benji, they managed to recruit Paris and Degas to their side, so the team's a little bit bigger now. They managed to thwart the Russians, or most of them, managed to get the coordinates out and managed to send them to him. In the process of this, the Russians unfortunately come across the submarine they're chasing, and Ethan has to kind of jump out at a turn, and then he's got this special suit and he's got to try and get into the sub and get it. He does. He goes in, he gets it as he always do, manages to get out spectacularly, and is then rescued by Hayley Atwell's character Grace. This is where they then kind of all meet up, and this is where the entity gave him the gift. Like, in Africa, there is like this bunker server, and that's what Gabriel knows of. And that essentially, if you go to this bunker and let the entity in, then it will basically nuke the world. That's what it wants to do. But Ethan Hunt has a plan that basically he will let him in, but he'll kill him. But obviously it comes down to a split time in second, and that's why he kind of needs Grace in this. In between this, Gabriel knows what's doing, and he wants to kill the entity that is in that bunker before he can nuke it. So there's all kind of these different elements going on. It all leads down to the tunnel. When they get there, Gabriel's put a massive bomb in there. So Rolf Saxton, Degas and his wife, Rolf Saxton, his Native American wife, or Navajo, apologies, I don't get the terminology right, Eskimo type wife, lays helping to disarm the bomb with the gas. This is why Benji and Grace go into the device with Paris, into the server room to set it up for when they get the entity. But obviously, they need the device that Gabriel nicks, so obviously this leads to a confrontation between them. They run off, and then this is the plane fight that you see. It's very, very done spectacularly. Obviously, Ethan Hunt manages to get the device, plugs it in midair, sends it to Grace. Grace manages to cut it and saves it and saves the world. And it's all kind of miraculous as he kind of hits the ground and his parachute's gone off, and that you then hear the message from Luther, which is quite nice to kind of end it on it. And then it's kind of, there's some acknowledgement there. There are a few little twists and turns and surprises, but I won't give into it. So what did I think? I'm going to rate this 6.3. My rating keeps going up and down. So in parts, it feels like a Mission Impossible film. You've got the stunts, and I don't want to take that in any way. The losing of the losing of Luther is quite a sad one. That happens at the very beginning, but his message at the end kind of brings the movie back into kind of cohesion. Having Paris and Degas join the team was a good addition at the very beginning, but then they're really like rubbish. Like Paris was kicking ass and everything, and then when she goes against these specialty guys, she doesn't do that well. Degas kind of has to save her, and I think even having Degas on the movie or him swapping sides, he didn't really do a lot. Obviously, in between this, you have Angela Bassett as the president, and she has people in her room that you meet with Kittredge and stuff like this. A very well known Kittredge then ends up going to the server room later on. But then you have all these other characters. So you kind of have like, you have Ethan Hunt and Gabriel and the Divide and the entity trying to fight, and then you have all the kind of sidekicks, and then you have Kittredge and his guys, and then you have the American president. And there is so much going on. And the fact like he then goes to the aircraft character. He goes, I like the submarine. I don't mind the aircraft character. But there are so many new characters that are involved that this plot is like, there are like 20 main people involved. And I know it's a world, it's the final one. They had to save the world, and they've done it before, but this is a global scale. I thought having the entity didn't really do a lot. Like the entity can control a lot of stuff. Surely it could have killed a lot of people. It could have told somebody where the aircraft carrier was and sunk it and stuff like this. There's a lot of stuff that could have happened and didn't happen. Ethan's managed to walk around and being passed through certain governments and that. I said someone could have taken him out easy enough. The entity could have captured a drone and just flown it into the building that Ethan was in. Always find it hard with an AI, specifically when the AI doesn't really do a lot. It just coerces other people to do it, which I suppose is maybe the way. But then you have all these other elements going on, and it kind of, because he had his team, but he was by himself and not really with his team, and his team did little bits, it kind of distorted the whole story. And where, at a basis, it's the IMF team trying to do a mission and they just have to handle it, which is what they've done in the previous ones. This one, there's just so many different elements that it kind of dilutes it and it just doesn't feel as much. That's why I've given it 6.3. I mean, there were sections of it I didn't feel necessarily it needed. It obviously was quite a long movie. I get there were stunts and stuff like this, and some was a bit predictable. As I say, Luther's message in the end kind of brought it all back round, and I've probably given it more. I was going to give it a 6 and giving it 6.3, but it's not bad. You have to give it credit. There was like the plane fights and stuff like this, and how Gabriel gets kind of finished off was quite funny. And it has elements going for it. I don't think it's the strongest one of the bunch by far. I don't think it's necessarily the worst one, but I just feel for an end one they could have done it a little better. But it is what it is. Stuff was changed, stuff was probably changed and rewritten. Have you seen the final Reckoning Mission Impossible movie? What were your thoughts and feelings? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to respond to them as and when I see them. I've been Sy Sigma Screen Time, and I shall see you in the next one.